come on. 65 psi. If it's good enough for a mountain bike, it's got to be good enough for a tire. 10-year-old tire. It's kind of hard to see, but it's mainly surface cracking. But time to recommend tires, I guess, huh? There's no battery light. Check engine light comes on. It'll go off eventually. Sometimes the battery light does come on. There, it was on a second ago. There, now it's on again. Mitchell doesn't have any wiring diagrams for this thing. It's a 2002 Kia Mantis or something like that. 2.4 liter. There's the battery light. And I'm checking voltage. All of a sudden the voltage while driving will go down to below 11 volts. And then obviously the battery goes dead and the car dies. 2004 BEW TDI. No running issues, just in for an oil change servicing. I always like to check the in-tank pump because odds are the in-tank pump isn't working. And sure enough, I'm just going to scroll across here. The engine's already running at this point. So you can see me scrolling, and then all of a sudden, after tapping on the gas tank, this is where my boss tapped on the gas tank, the pump moved slightly, and then it continued to run. And you can see these are all the dead spots here. This is where it's turning, so just momentum alone keeps it spinning once it is spinning. And a good pump will have a sine wave pattern that's nice and even and uniform. I might get the after fix for you guys as well. You got your bare essentials. Get it? Bare essentials. So we're getting a lot of new customers from a shop that recently closed down just because of, you know, they're retired or whatnot. But this is not what I would expect from a shop like that. Upper coil springs don't even sit correctly in the upper rubber mount. At first I thought the spring was broken, but that's not the case. It's the same thing on the other side. You can see the spring isn't sitting correctly. And it's obviously been like that for a while because the bump stop is worn. That bump stop is supposed to be connected to this. So yeah, I guess they were in a rush when they put those coil springs in and shocks. Trunk doesn't open, so you have to go through the back seats. Looks like you gotta do some cleaning out first. Somebody didn't get a chance to go to the recycling depot. Hallo Dan, alles Gute zum Geburtstag von deinem deutschen Freund in Kanada. Mensch, du bist fast so alt wie ich und so hübsch wie der Leon. Weiter so. Okay, so here's the lower hose. All you need to do is stick a screwdriver in this little clip here and then move it to the left. Now you can see that it's in the unlocked position, and then you can just pull the hose out. And obviously a bit of oil will come out, and I think that's what you're after anyways. Just let it drain. When you're done, stick it back in. Push the clip back in, and then give the hose a pull just to make sure that it's locked. That's it. I've got a 5-speed transmission with a broken cable, shifter cable. Somebody else recently had trouble figuring out which gear they were in or how to interpret gears. So you can see this shifter or selector rod is spring loaded, so in its free neutral position, if you go in one direction then come back to the middle, and then go to the other. So that would be one gear. There's neutral, there's the other. So in its free position, it goes up and down. In its upmost free position, that's the gateway between 3 and 4. So you would go into, this guy's interfering. You'll be shifting into 3, back to neutral, and then 4. If you come up and you go over, that's 5th gear. You come back over to neutral, let go. If you try to go up and come this way, it won't go. Then if you go down a little bit, it doesn't hang up again. Okay, so this is 3 and 4. You go down and you go into, I think that's reverse. I went too far already, so just a little bit down. There's 1st gear, 2nd gear, back in neutral, I pop back up. If I go fully down and over, you can hear the distinct difference in tone. That's reverse. On the CIS engines that have the frequency valve, there's a little valve down here right next to the airflow meter or the fuel distributor, and that one's supposed to buzz. And you're supposed to get a duty cycle out of it. Think of the duty cycle as short-term fuel trim. So I'm just revving it up, and you can see the nice fluctuations. There's a deceleration. Now it's going back to about 45 to 50. If I push the wide open throttle switch, it goes to 60 rich. I let go, and it comes back to regulating. So think of it as short term. If you don't see this thing fluctuating, check your O2 sensor. This cannot fluctuate if the O2 sensor is not working correctly. O2 sensor is right back here. It's a yellow connector, single wire sensor. So you just hook up your multimeter here and you check for voltage changes. To adjust the mixture, there's a mixture screw down in here. Got a little hole right there. And you use a 3mm Allen to adjust the mixture. With the serpentine belt and the serpentine belt tensioner out of the way, you can see the timing marks on the pulley. Obviously, I used whiteout to make them stand out, but if you look closely, you'll be able to see the notches, even if they're not white. But making them white will make things easier to see, obviously. But again, it's just, all it is a reference in terms of TDC. You want to make sure that the flywheel mark is the one that's actually lining up. You want to go by that one. And then the cam mark is always. But as long as that's lining up fairly close and this one's lined up, you should have no fault codes in terms of camshaft position. Right up here. (2009) City Jetta. It's basically a Mark IV still. Somebody was mentioning that this is a Mark V cap. Well, City Jetta came with this cap. And here's a Mark IV cap. It's a little loose. It does click, but I think it does seal. I think it's just that the cap is a little loose. So this City Jetta does use the later style looking cap. Well, it's also a little loose. But as I mentioned, I think the diameter of the threads and the sealing surface of the O-ring here, it's all the same. They just decided to redesign the cap. What do you guys think about these steering wheel covers? Look at this. Isn't this dangerous? I was driving around the block and I'm just holding it as I keep saying in terms of I just put my hand on here as I normally do, you know, normal pressure, and I went to turn the steering wheel and then this thing slipped on me. This can be quite dangerous. I don't think this would be legal in Europe. So even though this may be a beautifying agent or obviously covering up worn spots on the steering wheel, you find yourself, or at least I do, I find myself having to hold it much tighter than I normally would hold a steering wheel. So it's not really of a benefit, is it? It's normal for the timing belt to sit off center. You can see this little ridge here. Here it's perfectly flat against the pulley. And if you look at the pulley itself, you can sort of make out the ridge where it was sitting before. So it is normal to sit off to the side like this. The tensioner here is what keeps the belt from walking that way, and it also has a lip preventing it from walking the other way. And you can see on the pump it's sitting in a similar fashion off to the side a little bit, which is perfectly fine. So you gotta take note of the little things sometimes. Well, maybe not the little things, but here's a case in point where a vehicle came in, it's been sitting for a couple of years. We're supposed to get it back running again. This is a used reservoir, just so you can see what it looks like. There's an indentation here. This is the fluid level sensor. This is the way it's supposed to look like. Take a look at this one. That's the level sensor. Look at how it has ballooned out. All of this has been pushed up. So at one point in time, this thing ran so hot under so much pressure because of an overheating issue that coolant tank got pushed up. So and then obviously think of all the other components in the cooling system that have possibly been compromised. So now it's back to life. It's running fine. Thermostat is opening. Fans are coming on. But what if, 2 months later something blows or the head gaskets go? You got to make a note of this is how it was, and then anything that happens down the road, the shop can't take responsibility for that. This is how it came in. We don't know how hot it ever got. We don't know how bad or how long it was running for when it was that hot. So you gotta cover yourself in terms of a shop, because if you don't document it, they'll take advantage of you. Mark 5 Rabbit, if your car is making a ratcheting noise when you turn the engine on, or just turn the key on and or use the recirculation flap. There's the flap right there, so it's open right now, or in terms of its recirculating air inside. Push it again, it's going to close, and you can see this one is not ratcheting. It was earlier, and that was because this window scraper was preventing the door from closing. You can sort of see it reaches all the way to the flap. So basically what was happening is the flap was binding, computer wanted it to close further and it couldn't, and it was ratcheting. Now that the obstruction is gone, no more ratcheting. So if yours is making noise, check that first. Otherwise, in order to remove this, you have to remove the glove box. I'll link a video in the description to another video that I made about changing that motor. AC fan removal on a Audi A6. I think it was 2001. There's a retaining screw right here. and each of the legs has a little tab. So a little tab here, and over here. So all you do is remove this retaining screw, and then you rotate this. It pops out of the fan shroud, and then you can move it from the fan shroud and then lift it out. So when it's in the vehicle, it sits like this. You remove that little screw right there, and then you turn it, and then you just lift it out. Somebody in the past, maybe sometime last year, asked me how to remove it, and I said move the lock carrier into the service position. Yes, I've been working on these things for over 20 years, but there was lots of stuff that I had never done. This was the first one that I had to replace. And when taking a closer look, that's what I realized. There's just a retaining screw. You move this, and this whole thing can come out without moving the whole radiator into service position. So now I can share the information that I gathered. Learn something new every day. Every time I want to make a video, it's noise. This is the air intake flap off of a 2-liter TDI, 2-liter common rail TDI. And this flap, you can see it's sticking. When it's in the off position, it should be open like this. Customers complaining about power loss, and this was actually stuck a lot more closed than it actually is, and we're able to free it up. And then when doing basic settings, or output tests I should say, it then moved open and closed, but before it didn't do anything, it was just stuck. If I remember the code that was set or flagged, I'll overlay it in the video. But otherwise, if you get a power performance issue or a throttle code, check to make sure that this thing moves correctly. And again, it's a TDI 2-liter common rail.
Sorted!